Still good morning. Well, obviously, good morning to all of you. I think the Lieutenant Governor and I, most of all, are grateful to the people of Massachusetts for affirming our approach to governing here in the Commonwealth, which is built on a community-oriented, collaborative approach to pursuing the things that matter to people here in the Commonwealth. And we just met with our staff this morning and walked through some of the stuff that is on the fall agenda and spent some time with our cabinet catching up with them on a variety of issues. From our point of view, today's a work day, and our goal and objective going forward is basically going to be to get back to work and chase some of the issues that are currently on our plate, as well as developing an agenda for calendar 19 and beyond.
Governor, what is that agenda? What do you look at out of the gate? You have a mandate from a re-election. How do you put it to work?
Well, I think the biggest part of the mandate was people want us to focus on the work. They want us to collaborate. They want us to be, as I said last night, tough on the issues and soft on the people. And I think most of all, that was a statement about tone and a statement about focus on building strong communities and doing the kinds of things we've been doing. We said during the course of the campaign that some of the issues that were going to be particularly important to us in a second term were continuing the work we started on the opioid issue, which we still have a really long way to go on. I mean, we're incredibly proud of the work that we've done to date with our colleagues in the legislature and folks in the healthcare and addiction community. But there's a ton of work left to be done there. We have a housing bill that's currently still sitting in the legislature. We've said many times that we need to build more housing in Massachusetts. We'll see if we can't nudge that along. We're still in active discussions with the legislature around a number of issues that we went back and forth with them on during the formal session, including the Airbnb legislation. We've also talked a lot about wanting to finish the work we started on transportation. We have an $8 billion capital plan for the MBTA over the course of the next 5 years and a $7.5 billion capital plan for our roads and bridges here in Massachusetts. We have a lot of work left to do on climate change. We're thrilled by the response we've had from cities and towns to our vulnerability planning initiatives, but as people develop hazard mitigation programs, we're going to need to put the environmental bond bill that we worked with the legislature to get passed last year to work. There's plenty to do.
Governor, I think the mandate that Matt mentioned will make it easier for you to get buy-in from the legislature on some issues where you didn't get it in the previous session, like, for example, housing?
I think the big message from the voters last night, and we were talking about this last night and this morning, was that what people really want more than anything is progress. And they want progress on the things that are going to improve the quality of their lives here in Massachusetts. And we've had a good working relationship with the legislature. We succeeded in getting a bunch of things accomplished. I mean, one of the things that I continue to believe is a major success story that, because it's kind of complicated, doesn't get the attention it necessarily deserves, is the work that we did with the legislature around energy. That offshore wind project stunned people. And if you talk to almost anybody who's in the deep water wind space, they'll tell you that that story had global implications for what's going to happen with offshore wind in the U.S. The feds have suddenly gotten really interested in putting a ton of acreage up for auction and out to bid off the East Coast. Connecticut and Rhode Island both jumped on the back of the procurement that we did here in Massachusetts. New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Virginia, all the way down the coast, people are talking about this. And a lot of the players who've been in this space for a long time in the European markets are suddenly pretty excited about it as well. That was all enabled by legislation that we worked with our colleagues in the legislature to get done 3 years ago. So I think the question really depends on our ability to continue to make the case to the legislature on a variety of issues. But I think the big message was we would really rather have our elected officials working with one another and trying to get things done than sniping at each other.
Governor, are you expecting any turnover in your cabinet or senior staff as you get ready for the second term? And have you thought at all about whether or not you'd be interested in running for a third term?
So, you know, people in our administration have come and gone since the start of our term, and we think we have a great team, and if they all choose to stay, that's great. But if some of them decide to move on, I'm sure we'll be able to come up with worthy successors. With respect to, we're not really thinking yet about, we've been talking mostly about what we want to get done in a second term. And that really, it does seem really premature, actually.
He ruled out a third term, perhaps even before his second term election. He went into a second term having ruled out a third term. I'm just wondering if you would do the same thing.
Well, I guess what I would start with is that the Lieutenant Governor and I have really enjoyed these jobs. We've really appreciated the chance to work with our colleagues here in the State House and in local government and local communities around Massachusetts. We think we've made a ton of progress on stuff we care about. We get accused sometimes of being the 3 yards in a cloud of dust administration, but if you add up 3 yards over time, if you're relentless about it, you can make a lot of progress. And I really like this job, and I really appreciate the voters' decision to give us a chance to continue to do it. But any decision about something like that would get made way down the road.
You're going to serve all 4 years?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Governor, it looks like the Democrats added to their supermajorities in the legislature. How do you think that will affect your ability to work with the legislature
Yeah.
for the next 4 years?
I mean, generally speaking, most of the incumbents who are running on both sides, theirs and ours, were reelected. I think the numbers are 2 in the House and 1 in the Senate. We've been pretty good at working with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle with that supermajority. That supermajority still exists. There wasn't that much change with respect to that. I think our objective is going to be to continue to set a tone that's based on collaboration, and I'm sure we'll find plenty of common ground to work with the legislature on. Many of the issues that I answered, many of the issues that were part of the answer to what do you want to focus on going forward, those are things a lot of folks in the legislature have been talking about wanting to work on too.
How will your relationship change with the House, U.S. House, now that it's Democratic control? You know, you also have Representatives Richard Neal and Jim McGovern in top positions.
So we have really good relationships with our congressional delegation and really good relationships with both Congressman McGovern and Congressman Neal. And I certainly expect that predicting what this all means at the federal level at this point in time won't be terribly productive. But I do believe that both of those gentlemen who we have worked with on a variety of issues and successfully moving up in the House should be a very good thing for Massachusetts and a very good thing for New England. And we would definitely look forward to working with them on some of the issues that we've talked to them about previously. We think that's a good development.
Governor, you almost won Lawrence and Boston. What do you attribute that to Democratic strongholds?
I think the biggest message that came out of this election just generally was people have seen a lot of us on the ground in their communities, and they've seen our cabinet on the ground in their communities, and they've seen our folks working with people in those communities to move things that were important to them forward. And one of the things the Lieutenant Governor said last night in her remarks is nobody had to introduce us to Dan Rivera, who's the mayor of Lawrence, when that terrible tragedy happened up there. He was somebody we were already working with on a variety of issues. We endorsed him when he ran for re-election. We're not strangers to Lawrence. We're not strangers to Boston. We're not strangers to Springfield and Worcester and Pittsfield and Fall River and New Bedford and a whole bunch of other communities where the voters were kind enough to turn out on our behalf yesterday. And I think some of this is a statement that if you do the work and you stay out of the partisan bickering and you try to make it about improving the quality of life for people in these communities, they appreciate that in Boston and in Worcester and in Fall River and New Bedford and Lawrence. And I think there's a big lesson there for a lot of people in public life.
Governor,
With
you tried.
refuge collections totaling over 27 million above the monthly benchmark and 86 million more than the annual collections for October 2017, any thoughts about reducing the income tax rate? Because in 2000, a lot of voters wanted to slash that to an even 5%. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are 5 triggers. You probably know more about this than I do. I think there are 5 triggers associated with the income tax. I think through the month of October, I think 4 of those triggers have been hit. And obviously, we're pleased by the early returns on tax revenue for this fiscal year. But the thing we said before about this, and it's an important issue, it affected last year's tax revenue and it will probably affect this year's. There's a lot of one-time stuff going on there, which is being driven by the changes in the federal tax law and some other things. But I certainly think that we've spent a lot of time over the last few years working to get the Commonwealth in a position where it could rebuild its rainy day fund, which we managed to do at the end of this fiscal year, continue to whittle away at that structural deficit, which we've done successfully over 4 years, and to do that without raising taxes, and at the same time to increase by 50% the earned income tax credit, which is a huge benefit to about 450,000 families here in the Commonwealth of Mass. But I'm obviously anxious to see what happens with the 5th trigger as well.
Thank you. During the grand bargain negotiations, you said that you were theoretically supportive of the idea of lowering the sales tax. Might we see some tax cut proposals come out of your administration in the second term?
Well, we were really thrilled by the fact that one of the things that did come out of that grand bargain was a permanent implementation of a sales tax holiday. That's now in state law. It's going to happen every year. We obviously have a budget to develop, and I'm sure we'll have more to say about some of that stuff as we go through that process.
Thanks, everybody. We gotta go.
I really do have to go.
I know you tried to avoid national politics, but now that you have a re-election by such a margin, you're not just a Republican governor of a blue state, but one that has like this mandate. Is it harder to not be a voice nationally, given you'll be looked to by many in your party and many in the Democrat side?
So one of the more positive developments in the election last night from where we sit is Governor Scott, who's a moderate Republican in Vermont who operates, I would argue, in many respects with the same kind of style that we bring to this task. Governor Sununu in New Hampshire, very similar, also got reelected. I think as a region, the message that we've been able to promote, Larry Hogan got reelected in Maryland with a similar approach to governing. People want their public officials to spend a little less time yelling at each other and a little more time trying to actually accomplish things. And I'm very excited to be able to work with our regional delegation to continue to do stuff on a regional basis. It's important here in New England.
Thanks, everyone.